Chairman Pavlidis,
Present.
Vice Chair Brown,
Here.
Secretary Treasurer Vitt,
Present.
Member Hughes. Absent. Member Armstrong,
Here.
Member Knight.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Statement. That's right. Let me remind everyone that if you're non-religious, you can have public on the flag represents
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, we please cover three
CYMPO complies with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and related non-discrimination statutes, regulations, and all programs and activities. Members of the public may review the CYMPO Title VI plan and submit a self-identification survey by accessing the CYMPO website.
statements. And you just do the record show that member accused. And for all the public, this item is provided opportunity for presentation of comments by the public on subjects not on the agenda. Individual wishing to address the board, we have requested to share with them for 3 minutes. Is there anyone present that would like to speak? Is there anyone virtual? What would minimize the audience topics? So that means that moving on to item 5, consideration of possible action to approve the April 2022 executive board regular meeting minutes. Mr. Gary.
So moved.
President and Supervisor of the company. Supervisor Brown, we have your motion. Can I have a second?
Okay.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All
Aye.
opposed? Moving on to item 6, executive director update. Gary.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'll speak up. I see several notes coming in virtually, but it's still difficult to hear. So Allison worked with the Prescott Valley County staff yesterday to try and prepare for the audio. I guess we're still having issues. So just if you can, please project into the microphone as best you can. Just a couple updates that I have. A week and a half ago, I had the honor of Senator Sinema asked me to facilitate a conversation with our local elected officials and decision makers about transportation and the IIJ bill. Several members, I believe Mayor Hughes, Mayor Good was there from this room, and we had a representation throughout the community. Great discussion. The hour went incredibly quickly. We heard about 10 communities present. And we talked about some of the challenges that we face in the 69 project, and she was going to follow up on a few things that we offered to her, so we appreciate her presence. You received the email that we have hired a new transit planner. Hopefully you looked at the email. Our new planner is Ray Stotler. She is currently the City of Prescott Community Development Director. Ray will be starting at CYMPO on June 30th, so we look forward to having Ray on the board with us. With that said, those are all announcements. If I have any questions or comments, I'd be glad to.
Any questions or comments? Moving on, item 7, mobility management transit update. Ms. Post. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Today, for mobility management and transit updates, I first want to share that the 5310 Regional Mobility Management Awards, the letters are due to us next week. So we'll learn how much of the $90,000 per year for the next 2 years we were awarded. And we will share that with you when we have that information next time. That will cover all mobility management coordination activities for the CYMPO region. My next update is about Yavapai Apache Transit. So this is exciting for us. Operating out of Camp Verde, They have received funds to expand their services into central Yavapai County. CYMPO is currently facilitating conversations on strategic planning with them and critical partners. So representatives from Prescott, Prescott Valley and the county, as well as YRT, because of the connections that are possible there. In Prescott Valley, Yavapai Apache Transit can connect with Groom that takes people down to the Phoenix airport, to essential services. So there's a bus stop at the Harkins that they are currently considering an MOU for. And then they will connect with the upcoming Yava line, which I'll discuss in just a minute. In Prescott, Yavapai Apache Transit, or YAT, I'll not use that so often because of the closeness to YRT. So Yavapai Apache Transit in Prescott would plan to start by connecting passengers to the VA and the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office, where they have many members working there and currently already run a van pool type service for that. And finally, they can connect to YRT and up into Chino Valley through those connections in Prescott and Prescott Valley. Speaking of YRT, they received their 5311 award letter. That's for public transit funding through ADOT. And it awarded them less than anticipated. So CYMPO is working with them to issue an appeal according to ADOT's processes. So I'll keep you informed of our success with that next time I see you. And finally, the Yava line. I'll go ahead and show you some pictures. The wrap for the bus is complete, and I've got a picture to show you for that. So this is 2 pictures of the same bus. As you can see, it's got, it takes its inspiration from the skyline. And as I recall, they had compared these buses sort of to how Boulder buses work, and that it's supposed to sort of blend into its environment as opposed to
Lindsay, can you hold on for a second? I don't have
course.
the picture, and I'm wondering if Gary does. I don't see it.
No, I don't see it either. All I've got is their menu.
Okay, thanks for telling me. Let me see how I can work that out. Okay.
You are screen sharing.
Isn't that strange? Okay.
Craig and.
Okay.
There we go.
Got it.
Got it.
The non-tech guy just fixed it.
Thank you, Supervisor Brown. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay.
And as you can see, there's multimodal access there with the bike rack on the front. So I'm excited to see it running down the line. Right now, the vendor for technical services is starting their work. So that's a vendor who will provide the Title VI plan and the safety plan called PTAS. So the vendor is currently working through that now, and we're helping them access critical documents like DBE and Title VI information. Mr. Chair, as mayor, is there anything you wanted to add about this service?
No, it's just it's exciting. We just got the wraps for this last week, so a lot of people have been talking about it. Our third party has been involved, and there's been a lot of conversation. Mr. Davis and his team have been working diligently on this. So it's just exciting to see it come to fruition.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Yesterday, we met with the chosen operator, New Horizons. Our next local coordinating council meeting for this group will take place at their establishment. They're going to host it because they have a new accessible tennis court off of their accessible gym. So that's really exciting. And this will just make it look even more beautiful. And as a former driver, I can appreciate that this is not body on chassis and it's not going to tip over anyway. So thank you for that choice. Last, for mobility management and transit, I wanted to highlight a Prescott area service. So People Who Care is a volunteer neighbor to neighbor, curb to curb, and door through door service, which just means that they don't just drop them off at the curb. Sometimes they take them all the way. Pardon me while I stop sharing. People Who Care was just recognized by the Yavapai County Board of Supervisors for 30 years of service. And they just received a commendation from the governor for the critical services that they provide in Prescott and beyond. So I want to say congratulations to them. Good work in Prescott. And that's all I have for mobility management and transit updates, unless you have any questions.
Mr. Gray, you said something like that.
Thank you, Lindsay. I just have a couple announcements to add to this. So something that Flagstaff has, as an example, in Coconino County, is they have the law that allows them to form what's called an IPTA, or an Intergovernmental Public Transit Authority. UMA also has that authority. The law previous to just recently said that any county with a population of 200,000 or less has that option to form. This past year, I've served on the Arizona Transit Association board for several years. I'm the chair of the legislative committee. We made this a effort to work on, and Governor Ducey just signed it about a week ago to increase the population from 200,000 to 400,000, which makes Yavapai County and Mojave eligible. What this means for our areas, number one, is we can have some future conversations. Is there a way to run transit in a more of a regional aspect like UMA does, like Flagstaff does? It doesn't require us to do it by no means, but it gives us another opportunity. So really grateful to Senator Sean Kerr from the UMA area, who sponsored that bill. The governor signed it last week. And I just wanted to make that announcement that in the future we can have this discussion and see if there's a better regional way of approaching transit. So keep that in mind. Also, FTA just sent a letter to the town of Prescott Valley appointing $1.6 million for public transit. That letter comes annually and requests how much money of that 1.6 wants to be kept for the urbanized area of Prescott and Prescott Valley. CYMPO, in working with Prescott Valley, has requested to retain that full amount. What that will do over the next year is again give us the opportunity, both Prescott Valley, Prescott, the greater region, and CYMPO, to see again what can be done with this $1.6 million. As we know, with government money, it's always easier said than done. There's always requirements and red tape and so forth, but the 1.6 million does give us a lot of opportunity for various projects. So I just want to thank Mayor Palguda and staff for signing that letter, retaining the money on behalf of the region, and CYMPO will be working with them to see what projects could be identified for the organized area. With that said, happy to answer any questions or comments.
Board of Amy, I'd like to see some type of a report on that regional transit authority. Obviously, I wasn't being allowed to apply for counties below 200,000. Now that the other 5 potentially create something of that sort, I'd like to find out what you did you say? What was the other one?
Flagstaff, like Coconino County, Flagstaff, and UMA.
They have actually done what the results of that formation were and how it might be able to be replicated or expanded in Yavapai as well.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair, Mayor Good. I'll be happy to follow up on that. I'll just give one note that Flagstaff, and I don't have the exact year, but probably about 10 years ago, was pretty segmented. The campus had their own transit, the city had their own transit, and they really didn't have a unified system. As of the last 5 or more years, they're a nationally recognized multi-billion-dollar system, one of the most recognized in the country. So we do look to Flagstaff for lots of modeling, lots of partnerships. We have great relationships with Flagstaff, and I'll provide you information, and they would also be happy to come and present on those systems. UMA is receiving a significant amount of money as a IPTA, again, to operate their system. I don't want to quote money, but it's pretty dramatic how much they're receiving. So with that said, I'll be happy to follow up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on, item 8, rural transportation advocacy council, our back update, Mr. Adam. Good to see you here and on time.
It's that traffic.
Mr. Adam, we just pull that microphone a little bit more.
Sure. Is that good? Thank you. And yeah, the traffic going up the hill is horrible in 17, I tell you. And we're going to fix that, right? We're going to keep advocating and keep that investment levels increasing. And good segue to the legislative update. And the legislature is in what's the we would consider the final stage of session, and that's predominantly focused on coming to an agreement and enacting a budget. It's very,
I just wanted to let you know that
sorry. It's very unpredictable as far as the length of time that it takes. It's very hard to gauge how close they are at the leadership level as far as drafting a blueprint. And then secondly, once they have that blueprint in place, whether or not they have the votes to actually pass it. The typical time frame that you're looking at is, they target 100 days for a session. We're past the 120th day. On the other end of the parameter, they need to have a state budget passed and in place by July 1st. More years than not, they tend to be closer to that 100-day mark than the July 1st. Last year was an exception. They weren't able to vote out a budget until June 30th. And of course, I think much of that was because of the very even partisan split of the legislature makes it very difficult to cobble the votes to pass a budget. And of course, that partisan split is the same this year. And so those same challenges will continue. And so there's, again, no real accurate way to predict how close they are. But all indications are the session will likely run closer to the end of June than it will be, wrapping up this week for sure. With that said, on a positive note from the transportation perspective, they have a historically high level of revenue to work with this year. Of course, much of that was induced by COVID or the reactions to COVID with the federal assistance that came in, anticipating a dramatic downturn in or a government shutdown essentially of the economy. And the state legislature also responded with an extreme limitation on spending increases, which is very impactful in a high growth state such as ours. And so you put that all together with the fact that the economy continued to boom even during the pandemic when things were shut down. They have over a balance of over $5 billion to work with this year. Of that, they estimate about 2.8 billion of that to be one-time in nature. And that's really what we're looking at as far as transportation, because capital improvements are an ideal use of one-time funding. And there's a lot of demand and interest for that revenue and how to use it. But it's very clear that infrastructure is in that mix. What we haven't seen is to what level they'll provide it in order to assist with a federal grant application to complete the widening of I-10 and to have some local or state money secured to make the application more competitive. The legislature a couple of weeks ago passed and the governor signed a $400 million appropriation for that I-10 project. So we know that we've already got $400 million that's been dedicated to transportation. We fully anticipate that we'll see more. But just to put things in perspective, in a good year, you're typically looking at 400 to 500 million being available to them for additional spending. 2.8 billion this year. It's an unheard of level, and it's one that I don't know that we'll see it again in our lifetime. But with that said, I fully expect that the legislature will also pare down or limit spending. What that would entail or look like is that we would probably have a carry forward balance for next year as well, which also bodes well for potentially funding transportation projects next year. But I think we were engaged and very well prepared to address this anticipated revenue this year with the legislation that we put together. That is definitely in consideration in those leadership budget discussions. The 36 predominantly local projects from across greater Arizona. It's looking real good as far as their inclusion. If you'll recall, because of some opposition to including local projects in the state budget, we came up with an alternative list of state highway projects across greater Arizona. And I believe, I don't think we'll see that full list funded, but I think there's a strong possibility that we'll see our original list plus some additional projects from that alternative state list as well. So, can't say with any certainty right now, but with the way the discussions are going, we're confident that we will see some transportation funding, some additional funding directed to greater Arizona. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Kevin, do you think that 400 million is enough to complete that widening from 4 lanes to 6 lanes down above Tucson and below for that endpoint before it winds up?
Mayor, it is not. In fact, right now, the estimated unfinished work on I-10, it's a 26-mile stretch between Casa Grande and Chandler. It's estimated to cost about $1 billion. There is some money that has already been programmed by ADOT. This appropriation is again for $400 million. The federal mega grant application that ADOT has submitted would be for $300 million. And I think it's going to be a very good application. However, I think it's also to put it in perspective, there's $1 billion available nationwide. As mega would imply, this is for exceptionally large projects. In fact, the way the funding is structured, 50% of it has to go to a project that's at least 500 million. And that basically, if you do the math, that means half of the funding is going to be used on one project. The remaining 50% has to be for a project in the 100 to 500 million range. So that would, so if you're going 100 million each, that's 5. So at a maximum, there will be 6 projects awarded nationwide. If ADOT is successful with their 300 million application, that brings it down to 4 projects. So I think we've got a great application that's been put forward, but I think it will be extremely competitive across the country. Because this is ADOT's stated top priority right now, this has ramifications for the rest of the state. If we were able to bring in that additional 300 million in federal funding, that's going to alleviate a lot of pressure on some of that ADOT discretionary funding that they have. Keep in mind, the majority of this project is in Pinal County, which is part of Greater Arizona and part of that same pot of discretionary funding that ADOT has to work with, that also includes Yavapai County. So this, if we're able to bring in this additional federal funding, that's going to alleviate pressure to use ADOT funding that would be utilized elsewhere across Greater Arizona.
Thanks, Kevin. Anything else, Mr. Adam?
Well, Kevin's up here. We're getting ready to announce the World Transportation Summit, which will be held in September, September 14th through the 15th. If you remember last year, because of COVID and other things, we really streamlined it dramatically compared to previous years. At this point, with Kevin's help, it's our intent to go ahead and open it up. I think we're going to do about 250 total.
Yes.
But the intent would be to the Greater Arizona MPOs and COGS, to the boards and the tax, and of course the staff. So just put that on your calendar. We're still working on the agenda. The host will still be at the city of Maricopa. The host will be the Sun Corridor MPO, Central Arizona Government, or CAG, and it'll be at the Auction Casino in Maricopa. Working on the agenda. I know we definitely haven't got through this year, but we're working with Kevin to already prepare for an ask for next year, which is something simple we'll be working on if we're in this, if we have the opportunity to go after coming again. So just a couple of heads up as it relates to our impact on this summer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 9, project update on Sunbelt Connected Design Concept Report and environmental overview.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so I just want to bring you a brief update on the Sunbelt Connector Design Concept Report. We did have the kickoff meeting with the technical committee that will be the technical committee throughout the project. In just a moment, I'll turn it over to our project manager, Lindsay, and she'll give you she's not going to go through all the slides, but a couple of the slides we used at the kickoff that'll kind of let you know what the next 18 months looks like. Just a few hours ago, we did receive some pretty big information that relates to this project. I haven't received it in writing yet, so I'll just give you the verbal. The federal highway 10-year construction clock has come to an end, period, for all projects. So I know that was a major discussion about committing federal dollars towards this project, that there would need to be movement within 10 years. The ADOT staff has informed us that it's not a thing any longer. Again, I'll get that in writing and share it with you officially, but just wanted to give you that good news on the project. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay, and she'll just give you a 5-minute brief update of what we covered in about 2 hours. So Lindsay.
That's a little pressure.
For 7 minutes.
Okay. So CYMPO staff, along with the TAP and several identified technical partners, such as I see him here today, Mr. Ashley Couch, Public Works, and local agency planners, as well as the consultant team and their sub-consultant, make up the project-specific TAC called the STAC. You can either thank or blame Dan Cherry for that. The STAC will meet monthly to ensure that we have progress on the project. And I'll briefly run through the presentation given during the kickoff meeting on May 10th. Credit for this presentation does go to Matt Bondi. I have truncated it a little bit for our purposes here today. Before I show you that, I just want to reiterate that the goal is to complete the upcoming SR 69 master plan at the same time as this DCR, to provide both for your consideration and possible action when they complete. Supervisor Brown, give me a thumbs up if you see it on the screen. Thank you. Okay, so as I just mentioned, the staff consists of mostly the TAP as well as other critical technical partners. And then of course, we always have Carrie Hughes on the list, so thank her for me. Next is an area map.
Sorry, can you go back to it?
Sure.
just want to announce to the board too, we identified these as critical PAC members, but if you have other staff members that you would like to represent the community, by all means, let us know. We'd be happy to expand the list, but this is the technical committee for the project. If you have others, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny. Next is a study area map. I particularly like this one, Matt, so thank you for providing it. It shows the APS transmission line. APS was invited to be on our stakeholder group, which I'll discuss in just a minute. You'll see the future Yavapai Hills development area and then the proposed terminus. Our study goals are listed here. My personal goal with this project is for as much transparency and openness as I can possibly provide. So you'll see the ways in which I'll do that with the help of our consulting group. And next is a visual of the study work plan. More details will be provided for you as we go through this presentation, but this is in your packet for a visual aid. That was too fast. We are going to hold monthly staff meetings. We are also going to hold the first stakeholder meeting here soon, which I'll discuss in a second, and that will sort of act as our next staff meeting as well. And we'll also hold meetings as needed if something comes up. Those will always be virtual and in person to ensure maximum participation. And then the next few slides outline each task in the work plan. These are more technical than I intend to get into today, but I and Matt Bondi are here and can help you answer questions if you do have them. So the slides that you have show those tasks. And they have identified teams that will work toward each task, including them and their sub-consultant, Kimberly Horn. I want to stop here on the public engagement process because I really want to highlight that this is a very robust public engagement process, especially towards my goal of transparency. But especially because 1/4 of the budget is dedicated to public engagement in this highly visible project. Please do stop me if you have any questions or if you want me to go back to a certain slide. I'll keep moving through the tasks that you'll anticipate seeing the committee work on. Some deliverables include cost estimates for 2 build alternatives, a 15% design plan, and a draft and final DCR, as well as the environmental overview. We are working with our EMAC subcommittee to make sure that we identify any potential partnerships or funding sources or thinking outside the box methods. And finally, this is a draft schedule. We've already issued the notice to proceed. We've kicked off the project. We anticipate a public involvement plan from Kate Bondi this month. And data counts and analysis is already going to go underway because we want to do that while school is still in session. And you'll notice, as I mentioned before, it is anticipated to end September 2023. And we hope to have a SR 69 master corridor plan for your consideration as well. Next steps is listed. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just want to highlight and acknowledge the 2 public meetings that are general open house meetings, and that we're looking at August or the end of the summer for public outreach. Meeting number 1, and then public meeting number 2 is February 2023. So those again will be completely open. With that said, as Lindsay keeps emphasizing, we will have several stakeholder meetings. We're going to have PAC meetings in addition to updates at the executive board, which are public meetings, the TAC meetings, which are public meetings. So we want to provide as many opportunities as possible. In the contract, we also have built into special presentations for the Prescott City Council, the Prescott Valley Town Council, and also for the consulting team to work with us to identify special stakeholders possibly like the homeowners association or other significant key groups. So again, as Lindsay mentioned, 1/4 of the budget is committed just to public engagement. So I would ask the board if there is something that you're seeing that would help in getting the communication. I would be happy with that, focusing on that.
Thank you, Vinny. Oh, you took us right away from that. And finally, the next steps. And so we just discussed that. Thank you, Vinny, for your help on that. I'll go ahead and stop sharing this document unless there's any slides you'd like me to readdress, or if you have any questions on them. I do just want to mention that I will be inviting you, or at least making you aware of any meetings. There's a newsletter that I'm developing that will go out monthly to the public and to stakeholders and to anybody who wants it. So unless you want to opt out, I'll go ahead and put you all on that list as well. Thank you. That's all I have for, actually, I do want to discuss very briefly the stakeholder list that we've been developing. So part of the process at our kickoff meeting was to discuss the stakeholder list. It's in your packet. Give me just 1 second, I'll pull it up now. Pardon those in the room, I'm going to scroll. Just go ahead and share now so that you can see the brand for the project, because it's surprisingly good for somebody who didn't know what a sundog actually was. So sundog is sort of a solar flare, and it's an effect that you have visually. I really like that it's got that sort of look to it, as well as an element of transportation or ways spotting, I guess. So well done, Bondi's, on that. Thank you. You haven't lost me. I'm just very slow at moments. Our preliminary stakeholder list. I want to thank everybody in the room who's participated and helped me develop this list. You'll see here that it includes a very diverse group of representatives. We want to make sure that we have representation from community and interest affinity groups, HOAs, developers, community businesses, tourism. So if there's anybody that you don't see that you think should be listed, please do let me know. But we've already identified a great deal of these people already. And so the first newsletter is going to go out today to the folks representing the roles that you see here. And so I want to thank those in the room who helped me develop this. Are there any questions about the stakeholder list or any glaring gaps that you think could be filled by somebody in your organizations?
Ms. Moses, it looks like you have Town of Husky Valley Fire and then Capital Central Arizona Fire. So Town of Husky Valley is, we have Capital.
Yes, and thank you to Norm Davis, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for pointing that out. I did actually reach out to Rick at CAFMA, and yes, and he'll be participating. Thanks for your keen eye on that. Any other questions or suggestions so far? If not, you can always reach out to me.
Well, Lindsay, I would ask him, I asked this of our staff in the city of Preston, whenever we're moving into more public meetings, that we throw around a lot of acronyms here. And for the people that are constantly involved with the CYMPO projects, a lot of those acronyms are very well known. But I think the public at large has no clue half the time what these mean. So if we're going to have meetings like this, let's include a slide that describes what those acronyms are, so the public at large will have a better understanding of what we're talking about. And I think that will be more understandable for them in general.
That's a great idea, especially because acronyms mean so many different things if you try to Google it. So that's a great idea. Thank you.
I would like to ask how the potential regional park and acquisition that the three entities, Pike County, Prescott Valley, and Prescott, are working together in this intergovernmental agreement, and how that regional
Yeah, we've been trying to keep as close an eye on that as we possibly can. Is there anything you want to speak to that, Lynn?
Yeah, no, I would appreciate anywhere you can get CYMPO plugged in. Obviously, our leadership is at the table and your staff's at the table, but I think it was Mayor Paluda and Town Manager updated me on what had been happening recently. So I appreciate that communication, but keep us in the loop because I really do see this as incredibly beneficial here into the region. Most specifically to this project. I've already updated Matt Bondi, the project manager, on what I'm aware of in progress. I know it's still a work in progress, but we do want to make that a part of the plan. It's critical that's a part. I know some of the objection I received early on quite a bit was, again, that state trust potentially turning into residential someday, promoting more development and so forth. As I understand the plan so far, it's that it will be the Tri-City or the county, Preston and Preston Valleys will be preserved that is open space. So again, this is a very much of a positive thing as it deals with some of the public that's been opposed to this development and project. So I would ask if there's any way to plug me into any ongoing communication or meetings would be helpful to keep us whatever's happening with the
I agree.
So, thank you, Mr. Host. Moving on to item 10, review and discussion to draft scope of work for the SR 69 urbanized corridor master plan. Ms. Rose, will you be handling this?
Yes, thank you. Sure.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
No worries. Mr. Chair, members of the board, just want to give you a heads up that if you remember at the strategic retreat last year, the discussion was, do we start with Sundog Connector or do we start with 69? It was very close, but basically Sundog barely won out. And the second project was the corridor planning for State Route 69. There's always discussion as to how much MPOs either focus on the highways or they don't. This MPO historically has been pretty involved in the highway system because of the significance to our Quad City region, our area. So yes, commentary would be that the state route is ADOT's responsibility to plan for, to build, to construct. But again, historically, CYMPO has been very active to be nudging ADOT along. So that is why CYMPO has taken on this project that maybe in other areas ADOT might actually take the lead on, because we do know that 69 remains to be a very congested highway. As you come into Preston Valley throughout and going towards Preston, again, the traffic is around 45,000 cars a day, which is pretty intense. So again, the discussion at the retreat was to do a master corridor. There's been several studies that have been done on 69, but we're looking to take one even deeper. We're looking at a 15.5-mile corridor from 89 in Preston to 169 on the border of Dewey Humboldt and Preston Valley, and look at the entire corridor and be able to break it down into various segments and projects, and ultimately prioritize with your participation, your input, as to how can we, to some degree, really start moving towards helping with safety and capacity for the road. So with that said, right now we have about $450,000 programmed and set aside to do a master corridor plan for State Route 69. We're currently, Lindsay is the project manager. She's currently working with the technical committee, but we do want to bring this draft to you. It's still early on, but we're bringing it to you because we want you to add input. We're going to clearly bring the final package to you in a month or so for your final approval, but we want to be sure that we're capturing anything that you would like to see in the scope, studied, evaluated, and produced. So with that said, Lindsay, you want to just kind of get a brief run through on where you are with the scope?
Absolutely. Thank you, Vinny. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll go ahead and share the screen while I speak. So in your packet, we've provided a draft scope of work for the SR 69 Master Corridor Plan. The scope was developed with input from the TAC, the EMAC, and based on my research of comparable community plans. Nothing compares to our area, just to highlight that. But I've highlighted the areas where I've made updates already since the agenda was sent out to you, because this is an ongoing effort. I'll go ahead and run through the major components and highlight those updates for you. The first change was simply the change in the title for section C to make it more standard terminology for these types of scopes. Section D, project management and coordination, was added with the suggestion of one of our consulting partners. And that is to meet regularly with the project team for the Sundog connector. Since they're running simultaneously, it makes sense that there should be pretty frequent coordination between the two to ensure data efficiency. The first thing you might have noticed is I made it a little easier for you to identify items by lettering a number of it as opposed to bullet points. So I hope that does help. In section E, we've asked for scenarios. You'll notice scenario A, Sundog connector gets built, and how that would impact the levels of service for SR69. Thank you, sir. That'll help. Scenario B, what if the Sundog connector is not built? How would that affect future levels of service? And then scenario C, other potential arterials, roads, connections. We'd ask that the consulting group would help us work through those potentials. And the next change is section G for freight. It was empty before as I was trying to suss out what I wanted there, but because this is identified as a national freight corridor, we want the scope to identify improvements and possible implementations, and then identify possible funding sources. Public involvement is less involved than Sundog connector, but we do want one public community meeting, one stakeholder meeting, and this is an area where I'll continue to improve before I submit this to you as a final draft or a final. And then the last changes were in the implementation and deliverables section. A desktop review of the key components was suggested. And there are number 8, alternatives development and evaluation. So we'd like to have at least 2 build scenarios where they will analyze and evaluate levels of service in those build scenarios. So those are the changes that I've made since you've seen it. The estimated schedule has not changed. We've discussed it already before, but we hope to align it right there with Sundog. Are there any questions or comments on this?
I'll just add to the comment to the schedule. So again, our intent as staff is to run an 18-month Sundog project, a 12-month 69 project, with the intent that you'll have the results of those studies roughly the same time. As a region, you'll be able to review where the region wants to commit. Would you want to commit to a design construction of Sundog, or is it to pressure ADOT and look for more monies to improve 69? So that's the intent. With that said, that would be a great question or comment.
Anything from Ms. Poster? Thank you. Moving on to presentation of the final adaptive signal control technology, assessment of need, benefit, and implementation of carriers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So if you remember, we had this listed on the agenda last month, and the consultant wasn't available. So we did this a little bit backwards in that we actually talked about the implementation that was already happening. And we had representation, we had Ian Mattingly from the city of Prescott talk about implementation on Willow Creek Road. Norm Davis talked about implementation on Glassford, and Andy Roth talked about implementation on State Route 69. So in reverse order, we have the consultant to give the final presentation. Dana Biskin's with us. She's the project manager, and she works for the firm Burgess and Nykel. They did the adaptive traffic signal study for the region. And again, it was these 3 corridors that we focused on. I believe it's around 58 traffic signals. This project was initiated by our regional transportation plan. It was identified as a priority that we look at these 3 corridors and we look at alternative ways of using technology as opposed to the actual maybe road widenings or typical infrastructure. So CYMPO launched this plan a little over a year ago. We spent a little over $200,000 to conduct the study. With that said, I'd be like to introduce and turn it over to Dana Liston to present to you all. Dana?
Hi, thank you for having me today. And I am going to share my screen. So let me know when you're able to see that. Good?
Yes.
Okay. So the plan, purpose, and need was to identify, recommend, prioritize improvements for efficiency and operation, look at the existing infrastructure, evaluate potential strategies, and recommend phased improvements. This was the original schedule. As you'll see as we walk through this, there was a turn in the scope based on the study findings. So we initiated it per plan, but the team adapted basically to the changes, which I know you've already all heard. So for SR 69, the limits were SR 89 to Fane Road. And basically within the study limits, there were 22 signals, volumes, 25 to 40,000 vehicles per day. They do have, ADOT has good vehicle detection, communications, and controllers, meaning the traffic signals more or less know what's happening around them and communicate with each other. And then they can adjust them if needed. And there are a few signals that don't have communications, but those are pretty far from the other signals. So it would be difficult to provide coordination between them anyway. Glassford Hill Road was examined between SR 69 and 89A. That segment has 10 traffic signals, average daily traffic of 20,000 to 25,000 vehicles. They have detection, there's no communication, and then they've got the controllers for the signals that are good. In general, the corridor was, with the existing operations, the corridor is using time of day plans. There were generally acceptable operations, but there were some, at the onset of this study, the progression wasn't great. And what we found was basically there had been a lot of development in the area, so traffic progression could be improved with optimization and updating the time of day plans. For Willow Creek Road, the study limits were Gurley to Depot Ranch, and that includes 20 signals, volumes daily, 20 to 25,000 vehicles, less detection, so loops on the left turns and minor approaches only, meaning that's the only opportunity for a change in signal phasing. The communications are somewhat older, and again, some of the controllers are older, meaning they wouldn't work with a lot of new systems and new technologies. So what we found was while a lot of the individual signal timing was okay, there was no coordination between the intersections and there was no time of day plan in use. So while, for example, you might not have excessive delay at any one intersection, there's no way to progress quickly through the corridor because there wasn't timing between the signals. So there would be a lot of stop and go traffic. So there was a lot of opportunity to improve progression with optimized time of day plans and enhancing coordination. So once we had kind of the base conditions, we conducted a technology summit. And because again, ASCT is a very technology intensive ITS solution. So we engaged MCDOT and Peoria to talk about the Bell Road corridor, and ADOT and the PEMA Association of Governments to talk about State Route 77. And I'm going to share a few slides from the MCDOT presentation about Bell Road, because it was really pretty insightful, I think, for the rest of the group. So when MCDOT began sharing, about their regional signal infrastructure, they mentioned that they have over 3,300 signalized intersection. And of those, 88% have communications. And they have a regional community network. They also have a traffic management center. They have, basically they have a lot of ITS infrastructure, and a lot of it is quite advanced, and they have a lot of advanced ways to manage it. They also have, because of all of this, a lot of staff with a lot of experience working with all these different types of technologies, basically all the steps on the way up to ASCT. And they kind of, MCDOT explained, you know, generally speaking, when you're looking at technology upgrades for signals, there's kind of this pyramid. So the first thing, you know, would be to have good communications, which you see at the bottom, and then kind of progress your way up. So detection, timing, coordination, looking at having performance measures, and then eventually getting into ASCT solutions or adaptive signal control technology. And we just talked about the corridors subject to this study. So while SR 69, you know, is up through coordination, and Glassford Hill had coordination between them, the signals as well, just again, needed to be updated. But for example, Willow Creek Road, you know, the signals aren't coordinated. So there's a lot of opportunity within this ITS sort of pyramid before you take the big jump to go to a technology intensive solution like adaptive signal control. And then just as an example, also adaptive signal control, and one of the things that MCDOT and the ADOT PAG team talked about was that where it's really beneficial is when you have very unpredictable traffic patterns. So because it's the Cadillac of traffic control, it can respond to what's happening on the road. It can make it difficult to coordinate to some extent with, you know, let's say the signal to, on this example here, you know, on your east-west roadway, if you have a signal directly to the north, because the east-west roadway, one cycle to the next, it could be different. But the east-west roadway will progress very well. You know, and I also talked about the volumes and the size of the facilities that we were examining within the CYMPO region. So for context, the Bell Road corridor has 65,000 vehicles per day. And it's a 6-lane facility. So typically you would look at those as kind of maximum capacity, 45 to 48,000. So you've got a very advanced infrastructure owner with a very overloaded facility with all of these different ballparks and stadiums along it. They called out 10 in the area that could influence operations, as well as other facilities too. So there's a lot of unpredictable demand and fairly overwhelming demand. So, you know, MCDOT addressed ASCT isn't always an appropriate solution. They took on kind of an incremental approach to come to the realization that ASCT would be an appropriate solution for them, and noted, you know, kind of all the pre-work that they did walking through those advanced steps made it eventually go smoothly when they did switch to an adaptive system. But that it's very critical that you have the communications, detection, and staff capability to support this before you take it on. So now switching back to our study, when we looked at SR 69, you can see this is a map. On the left is the volume for 1 hour interval, and across the bottom is different times of day. So the blue line represents July of 2019, the orange is October of 2019, and the gray is January of 2020. And you can see these lines are very, very close together. There is a little bit lower demand in July than in the winter months in the morning, but basically you could argue this is very predictable traffic patterns. So in order to have, again, in order for ASCT to work well, there's a lot of different infrastructure pieces that are required, and they have to be maintained and they have to work all the time or the system does not work. And then outside of the signal system, things that would affect your operations would be things like the signal spacing, Side street friction, basically meaning if there's a lot of driveways or things like that, people slowing down and accelerating in and out would influence how fast people can kind of move from signal to signal. Directionality and traffic volumes, sorry, so meaning in the morning, if everybody's going one way, in the evening, everybody's going the other way. Emergency vehicle preemption, and basically when I put high pedestrian calls, it's if there's an area that has a lot of pedestrians and they push the push button, typically that'll allow for a longer signal time, or it could, so that the pedestrian can get across the street. So then the signals kind of have to adjust again. So there's a lot of different things that can affect how well your system works outside of the signals themselves. And then there's other things to think about too. Major considerations being staff availability and commitment to the training and maintenance of these systems if you put them in, and the significant upfront cost and maintenance costs associated with ASCT. So after the technology summit, it was kind of, I would say it was fairly enlightening that this is in fact a very advanced system, and there are things that maybe we want to try before we go all the way to ASCT, which based on the other agencies' peer experience would be a preferred approach. So with Willow Creek, and I know you've already heard, they continue to upgrade their existing signal infrastructure. We reviewed different detection with them through the study, so actively working to make those upgrades. Glassford Hill Road, Prescott Valley requested that we retime their signals based on the findings of this study, and that that would essentially be the solution for the time being. And there wasn't really a need to move to an adaptive signal solution. So that was actually completed, I want to say in November, that those signals were retimed, which would, again, per the study's findings, improve operations. So with State Route 69, ADOT wanted to consider an ASCT solution and evaluate if it would or would not enhance traffic operations significantly. So we looked at 4 different alternatives, and I can show you graphically on the next slide, but basically Heather Heights to Navajo, Heather Heights to Walker, and Sundog Ranch to Navajo, so having a gap in the middle there, Heather Heights to Walker, and then basically just updated optimized signal timing, no ASCT. And we also, as I mentioned, ASCT can influence the operations. So if you have an east-west corridor, the signals directly to the north can be affected by the ASCT because it's not predictable by nature. So we looked at how ASCT would affect operations for Glassford Hill, the center court intersection, just to make sure that it wouldn't adversely influence that. And like I said, you can see this map that kind of denotes the limits of the different alternatives. Yellow being the no build would be the full length, and alternatives 1, 2, and 3 with various extents. And basically what the study found was that ASCT would improve progression during unpredictable traffic events. However, based on coordination with ADOT during the study and additional traffic count data obtained and provided, the traffic patterns were very predictable. And just before or during the study, ADOT upgraded, sorry, there's a little bug. ADOT upgraded the ITS system on State Route 69. So with that, they elected not to advance ASCT for the corridor. The benefit cost just wasn't reasonable. So we met with CYMPO staff, and there had been additional tasks to evaluate different things to do to make ASCT basically facilitate implementation, identify implementation steps. And through the partnership with CYMPO, essentially the group decided there wasn't really a need to do that at this time, that we would proceed with the Prescott Valley signal retiming and provide next steps guidance to Willow Creek and 69, but that it would just be not the best and most judicious use of funds to continue evaluating ASCT at this time. And so with that, we concluded the study early and under budget in November of 2021. So with that, do you have any questions for me?
Board, any questions, comments? Marius?
Yeah, I just would like to acknowledge, I've done this a while and I've never worked with a consultant to on a planning project to come in under around $35,000. So again, that savings in the end, thanks to Dana meeting with me and saying, you know, we can basically wrap this up. So Dana, we really do appreciate that. We were able to take that money and put it back into some other projects. So thank you for that and the work you did. Happy to answer any questions that come.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ralph. All right, we'll move on to item, review discussion of possible action to accept the SR 89, SR 89A on-ramp alternative selection report. Right, let's start us. Start one minute, just getting the slide ready. So we do have Matt Bondy, the project manager here. He's also the project manager on the Sundial Connector. So I've seen this page recently, if you've seen it. Working for AECOM, the consultant on this project. Again, we did the alternative selection report because this again was a priority out of the regional transportation plan, which looks at the next 25 years of transportation, and this was one of the highly ranked projects. The TAC identified continued evaluation. You'll also note that this is also one of the RTAC projects that were identified in both the original ask and the revised ask. In the revised ask, we're looking to fully fund the project. In the original ask, we're going to partially fund the project. So, Lindsay, are you ready to go?
Yes, I also want to mention that we did apply for funds through the congressional directed spending through our senator's office.
Thank you. Yeah, we turned that into the Senator Cinema and the most senators to consider that. So we have been trying to make this project happen sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gallo stole most of my thunder. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce the project manager from AECOM, Mr. Matt Bondy. And while he comes up, I'll go ahead and pull up this presentation.
Thank you. Welcome, sir.
Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, my name is Matt Bondy. I am the project manager with AECOM, who is the consultant for CYMPO on this project. We have prepared a presentation here to kind of go through the process and to present the findings of the report. So as Lindsay is pulling it up here, so. All right, so we have it up on the screen here. So again, this report kicked off around the fall of last year, so fall of 2021. Just to give everyone kind of an overview of what the project was. And again, we'll go through the process and what the findings were. We have a slide of the study area up on the screen here. So again, looking at the west end, this is SR 89, the SR 89, SR 89A traffic interchange are the limits on the west end. The limits extended to the east of Larry Caldwell Drive. So it ended essentially just west of the Granite Creek Bridge. In between there, you know, again, the primary goal of the study was to look at recommended improvements or needs for that SR 89, SR 89A on ramp. So within those limits, primarily looking at issues or alternatives or things to possible improvement at that on ramp, also eastbound SR 89A, and also the frontage road, the eastbound frontage road between SR 89 and Larry Caldwell Drive. Within the map here, we do show some of the key issues that were some of the needs to look at some of the alternatives and some of the possible improvements for the project. We'll run through some of those real quickly here, so that the key issues, existing issues out there that are out there today, kind of highlighted in red. So looking first at the SR 89, SR 89A traffic interchange. The southbound, there's an existing dual left turn lane there. So as you access the ramp, or looking to make that eastbound movement onto the ramp or onto the frontage road. There's a dual left turn lane. One of the issues out there today is there is some underutilization of that outside lane, that outside left turn lane, that is due to the configuration of the ramp. So as you make that left turn, you have to align yourself present day to be within that inside left turn lane, so you can then access the SR 89A on ramp. That again, if you want to access the frontage road and continue on to Larry Caldwell Drive, you have to position yourself into that outside lane. So that was one of the issues to look at there for possible improvements. Another issue related with that, as you work your way down the frontage road over to the ramp, there is limited sight distance due to an existing vertical curve out there. So basically, we have a photo that we can show on the next slide as well. But as you're approaching that entrance ramp, you're going up grade. You have some kind of reduced visibility on when you can actually see the access point to that existing on ramp. So as and again, with the way the lane assignment is, if you're on that inside lane, you're heading toward the ramp, you might not realize, if you're unfamiliar with the area, that if you want to continue on to Larry Caldwell Drive, you have to get over into that outside lane. So you have, once you see it, you only have a very limited distance to make that adjustment in lane. And then vice versa, if you're attempting to enter the ramp, you're on the outside lane, you might not realize that you're not aligned in the correct ramp until you're almost already up to that ramp location. So that was another one of the issues there. As the actual ramp itself, one of the issues is it is a shorter ramp. It is but the actual length of the ramp is less than what would be desired for an on-ramp today. Then the other really big issue out there is the way the configuration of the main line, the eastbound main line, the on-ramp and the frontage road. There's no physical separation between the main line, the ramp, and the frontage road. So somebody who is traveling on eastbound SR 89A could weave all the way over, crossing the ramp and entering into the frontage road. So kind of an unsafe weaving condition. We flip to the next slide here though. So we have a couple photos of some of those existing issues out here. So this is along the frontage road in the location where the ramp entrance is. As you can see, there's no physical separation between the main line, the ramp, and the frontage road. So any car traveling in that eastbound direction could weave all the way across and try to get on that frontage road and access Larry Caldwell Drive. Then this is a condition looking further west up the frontage road. The photo on the left is highlighting the reduced or the limited sight distance vertically to be able to see the ramp as you're approaching it. And if you're in that wrong lane, the assignment, you'll have some limited distance to get yourself in the correct lane as you're working down there towards it. So there is the picture on the right is some signage that is out there to hopefully help get the driver in the correct lane right now, but improvements can be made to make it a more clear situation and be a more standard situation for signage as you approach that ramp. So what we did then, again, overall, we looked at the preparation of an alternative selection report. We broke it down, our work plan here of how we could get from start to finish and the recommendations from it. We broke it down into 5 different work plan tasks. We started with kind of our one data collection and project kickoff, where we looked at our existing constraints, some of those existing and future conditions, and looked at some of the travel demand modeling and traffic analysis. We then moved on to our preparation of our alternatives and coming up with what our actual evaluation metrics would be to evaluate those alternatives. This was all done in collaboration with the TAC CYMPO group there. So we came up with the alternatives, determined what metrics we would use to evaluate these alternatives. So for later on, we could score them and compare them. We had a third task on there, which is our environmental overview. So we did, a desktop overview of the environmental conditions out there, looking for some of the existing data available, looking for any potential fatal flaws. Task 4 being the actual evaluation of the alternatives, scoring the alternatives, comparing the alternatives, and then ultimately coming up with the recommended alternative was. That all leading up to our task 5, which was the actual draft and final report, where we would go through the actual process of the alternative selection process, discuss future conditions, take the preferred to a 15% design, cost estimates, and such. So report documentation. So what our task 5 was, the actual deliverables. So some of the items that were looked at or were documented during the process. Again, we've touched on some of these existing and future conditions, the traffic and safety analysis, our desktop environmental overview, the actual alternatives development and evaluation. So through the course of the study, we looked at the no build alternative along with 6 other build alternatives throughout the evaluation. The recommended alternative that is the recommendation from the report is alternative 2. And then alternative 2, I'm going to go through some of the slides here and just kind of visually show what alternative 2 is and walk us through it here. So basically looking on the screen, alternative 2 is the recommendation for a 2-lane SR89A on-ramp. So if you can see on the screen there, that 2-lane on-ramp enters SR89A. As you approach the 2-lane on-ramp from what would be the frontage road or the ramp condition there, in this configuration, the inside lane can continue on to the SR89A on-ramp. The outside lane is also a choice lane, though, to be able to continue onto the on-ramp or to continue east towards Larry Caldwell Drive and continue on the frontage road. There is improved signage, overhead signage as you approach the ramp there. So you can kind of see the configuration of the signage showing the inside to the ramp and that outside being the choice lane. At the actual main line of the of SR89A, the alignment is realigned towards the median of SR89A. This is the benefit of doing this is this will correspond and will fit then with what it ultimately could be a future 3rd lane along SR89A. So it puts it in that ultimate condition for the additional lane on or future additional lane on SR89A. As you continue east of the entry onto SR89A, so the 2 SR89A on-ramp lanes enter and enter onto SR89A as well. So east of the ramp, we have 4 lanes continuing beyond the ramp. As we approach Larry Caldwell Drive, that outside 4th lane drops prior to Larry Caldwell Drive. So we then carry 3 travel lanes underneath Larry Caldwell Drive. We take that until Granite Creek Bridge, where again, we drop that outside lane, that outside 3rd lane to tie back into the existing 2-lane prior to Granite Creek Bridge. So we're not affecting Granite Creek Bridge at all. We tie back into that 2-lane typical section. We've also tapered back out from the median to tie back in to the existing condition as it is out there today. So some of the highlights of the recommended alternative. So this alternative improves regional connectivity. So with growth, some of the needs within this area, it improves that connectivity. Again, it is the most compatible with that future 3rd lane on SR89A. So realignment towards the median sets it up for that future 3rd lane. It has the largest access capacity benefit. So we carry that 2-lane onto SR89A. We carry it for as long as we can, and we drop accordingly as we move down the main line. This alternative did receive the highest agency TAC support. So when we put it in front of our TAC working group there, this one did garner the highest scoring. And again, this addresses those horizontal and vertical deficiencies that we touched on some in the beginning there. A few more of the features of it, or some of the key features of it. So this alternative, there's no new right-of-way required with this alternative. With that desktop environmental overview, there were no identified environmental impacts or major environmental impacts. They want to note that this the 50% level cost estimation for this project is $5.4 million. With that, alternative 2 is the recommended alternative. There are some next steps types items within the report outlining, with that recommendation, the next steps, if deemed to be to want to move forward with the recommendations, it would be able to move forward to the scoping and ultimately final design portion of the project. So some of those next step items are identified in that report as well. With that, it takes us through the presentation to open it up for any questions.
Good job, Mr. Bondi. Board, do you have any questions or comments from Mr. Bondi? If you don't, I'll take a motion to accept the report.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is by far the best alternative option. And from some of my conversations with our state representative, I think we have some pretty likely budget allocations that may cover the cost of that alternative. I would point out one issue. I know you're talking about the presentation of the alternative, but a lot of it's based upon your analysis of traffic volumes, average daily traffic, etc. And I know on page 3 of the data information that we were providing, there's really a glaring error there, where the Arizona State Demographer's Office is projecting population growth in the city of Prescott Valley from between 2020 and 2040 of about 15,000 plus, and their projection for the city of Prescott is a negative growth of approximately 3,000. So we already have approved over 9,500 dwelling units. So it's likely that our growth would be substantially above that, certainly no negative growth. So if you take 9,500 dwelling units times the average 2 residents per unit, we would be up around 60,000, certainly not a negative growth. So I imagine you probably would use some of that data in future analysis. So I think it's important to correct that projection of negative growth. It makes absolutely no sense at all. Those projects have been approved, they're plotted, they've received water allocations. So they're very likely to be built out over the next 10 to 20 years. And I think it's important that you figure that in, because if we have growth in that North Prescott area, there's going to be a lot more vehicles using that westbound on-ramp. And of course, a lot of the movement of vehicles from eastbound Prescott Valley and other locations into the primary economic core of the Yavapai County certainly have to be taken into consideration. So that doesn't really impact your alternate recommendation here, but I think for future projects, your population estimates need to be significantly correct.
Right.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Mr.
Anything
Chair,
else? Great, go ahead, Mr. Brown, sorry.
yeah, I'd like to make a motion to accept the SR 89 and 89A on-ramp alternative selection report.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, Mr. Bondi.
Thank you.
Moving on to 13, the Northwest District Report. Mr. Andrew Roth. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. And see Mike.
I apologize, our microphones are not made for me.
Yeah. Apparently neither was the camera. So our district administrator, Anthony Broses, does send his apologies for not being able to be here today, but he is at a 2-day management level.
Andy, we're down here, by the way.
Yeah.
Look down. There you go, right there.
Now,
We're looking at your
thank you,
other-
board member. Right. But he does apologize for not being here, attending a management level meeting 2 days. First on the list, our 2023 to 2027 tentative 5-year construction program is on schedule for a public hearing actually this Friday at the State Transportation Board. The public comments will be taken on that program up until 5 p.m. on Thursday, June 2nd. And we anticipate State Transportation Board formal action at their June 17th meeting. For our projects in construction, our SR 89 SPARS project, our microsurface project finally completed last week. They have some final punch list work, some patchwork, and some final striping yet to do out there. So that'll be happening in the near future. Beginning the week of May 23rd through the week of June 13th, pretty much all of the state routes within the CYMPO region will be undergoing our noxious weed herbicide treatment program. So anybody that's out there that are chemically sensitive to the herbicides, we should have already notified everybody that we know of. So if there's any other people out there that we don't know of, if anybody has any information on that, definitely send it our way and we'll get notices out to those individuals. Our Anthem Way to McGuireville I-17 broadband project, currently working from McGuireville to State Route 260, southbound side, and they still have some work to do at the bridge connections down on New River Bridge. So those will still be ongoing. And hopefully they'll be done installing all of the underground conduit end of May, maybe early June is what they're anticipating right now for that. And then after that, we'll be waiting for the proofing of the conduits, then the fiber installation, and then waiting for our node building up at McGuireville to make connections into that. That's coming from a different project from Flagstaff down to McGuireville. So more work on that one. It'll be going on throughout the summer. Our 2 projects for pavement replacements on State Route 69 from Mayor up to Dewey Humboldt, and the SR 89 Glassford Hill Road to Coyote Springs Road. Both of those, we're anticipating the contractor to start that sometime June or July. And those will both be night work, 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then our Anthem Way to Sunset Point Flex Lanes projects. All I can say on that one right now is that keep going to the website, improvingi17.com. All the information that we have for that project is really out there. That's the most updated information you can get on that right now. For our projects in design, the I-17 Sunset Point Rest Area Rehab Project is actually on board, State Transportation Board agenda this Friday for a consideration for award. So we'll see what happens on that one. That was the one that did come in 71% over our department estimate. There were a lot of factors that go into it, including cost escalations and other things. So even though we did increase our budget when we did the estimate, it obviously wasn't enough. So our facilities folks are scrambling to find the funding for that one as well. State Route 89A from State Route 89 to Glassford Hill Road. The bid opening on that project for the another pavement replacement and spot repair is actually this Friday. So we'll see how that comes in. And depending on who gets that, we may have 3 of those contracts under one contractor, which will help facilitate, at least for us, discussions with the contractors and coordination. But that will, we'll see how that one goes, fares here on Friday. And then the State Route 69 Truewood Drive, Stone Ridge Drive, the pavement rehabilitation on that project, still looking at second quarter fiscal year 23 for bid advertisement. State Route 69 Prescott Lakes Parkway to Frontier Village widening, still looking at a second quarter fiscal year 23 for bid advertisement on that project. And let's see, I-17, the State Route 169 TI underpass, the deck replacement, second quarter fiscal year 23, anticipated bid advertisement on that project. And finally, the State Route 89 from milepost 339 to 363, Paulden to Ash Fork, centerline rumble strip, unknown quarter yet on fiscal year 23 for bid advertisement. And Mr. Chair, and board members, that's all I have right now.
Sure. Board, do you have any questions or comments?
Seeing they're awarded and completed. Wait for long term.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Item 14, State Transportation Board report. Mr. Knight, can you hear us? You're up. Here.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got some good news after going over the agenda for Friday. There's quite a few items. In fact, in the PPAC, there's over 50, and Yavapai gets a few of them. Prescott Lakes Parkway to Frontier Village, the road widening, that's being increased from 1 million to 1.35 million. The change in scope, increase in the budget, and the project will be the good news probably for you is the project will be moved from forward, but it'll be moved forward without a multi-use path and lighting elements as per the city of Prescott and CYMPO. That's up for board approval. Grant Woods Parkway to I-17 on SR 169, milepost 3.5 to milepost 15, centerline rumble strips. That's project's been moved ahead from FY20 or from FY23 to FY22, and it's at 91,000 for, and it's on the agenda for board approval as well. Then there's various, and from our earlier conversations, but I can't, it doesn't say exactly where these are, but there's various in the northwest location, Cottonwood, Chino Valley, Prescott Valley. They're going to replace vehicle detection sensors to the tune of 289,000, and this was this is on the agenda as a new project. So, but it doesn't say exactly where. It just gives me Cottonwood, Chino Valley, Prescott Valley, and then there's a couple other that aren't in Yavapai County. So, but they're in the northwest. Then, as far as the awarding of contracts, there's 3 items on the agenda. One of them, Cordis Junction to I-7 at I-17. That Sunset Point rest area on milepost 251, it's going to get a complete rebuild to the tune of about $7.5 million. Hayden Building Corporation got that, was low bidder. So if board awards it, then they'll get it. US 93 Kingman Wickenburg Highway pavement marking LLC was the low bidder at $545,098. That's milepost 161.8 to milepost 190 or 182.6. That's install centerline rumble strips, crack seal, and pavement markings. There's one project in the city of Cottonwood, blowout wash bridge. They only had one bidder. It was overestimate, and by 271%, it's going to be postponed. And that's all I have. That's all on the upcoming board meeting for this Friday. It will be in the Salt River, Pima, Maricopa Indian community. And the board meeting will start at 9 a.m. It will be available both virtually and in person. And we will have the first and only public hearing for the 5-year plan. And I'll be happy to take any questions if anybody has anything.
Questions for Mr. Knight? Thanks, Gary. We appreciate it.
You bet.
Right before we adjourn, I just want to remind everyone, next month's meeting is in Dewey Humboldt, June 15th, 3 p.m. Let's check with Mayor Hughes if you have any questions or comments. And with that being said, we're going to move on to item 15, adjournment. All in favor, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed. Good night, everyone.
I don't know why I thought Allison had it, but I don't. Just end.